T-Mobile, and Jordan. So it's going to be a great group. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. They have some short presentations to start with, and then we're hopeful that our real track chair will be here to get the Q&A going. So, Lauren, why don't you go ahead and start if you'd like, since you're to the left. I don't know if you've got slides or not.
I do. Did you want to go into those, or?
I'll let you. They should be on this machine.
Yeah, he can go if you want T-Mobile to go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and go?
Calling you T-Mobile in person.
We should go alphabetically. So put AT&T up there. How do you go backwards? I would have thought it would have been that.
Just maybe up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott McGaldy. I'm Director of Engineering Systems and Planning. Primarily, I'm involved in the standards development process and research and development, mostly focused on 5G, applying a lot of the use cases that are involved in 5G. If you're not aware of what those are, in addition to broadband mobile, which is probably the most popular one that people would know, one of them is the massive machine type communications, which would involve smart cities, narrowband IoT, a lot of the machine-to-machine type of discussions, which is why they asked me here today. So I'm based here in Chicago with an office in Seattle, so I tend to travel around quite a bit. One of the things, I'm going to go through some of this quickly. I kind of wrote this up not really knowing how much time we would have. Let me find the little sucker there. Let's get past some of the things. Primarily, what I really want to talk about is how we're starting to enable some of the smart city solutions. In particular, we use Las Vegas as our biggest test bed. We've been involved in deploying in there and doing a lot of testing with the city of Las Vegas and with some other customers. We've been looking at a variety of use cases in the Las Vegas area, primarily trying to interconnect up what is traditionally set up as just timers and kind of local sensors to better optimize energy efficiency, to communicate better through fleet management, improve energy consumption, and looking at a variety of different aspects within the smart city. What we've really found is that to do these types of applications, you're going to need a wide variety of communications capabilities, different types of link budgets, which means different spectrum, which is where we think we really excel, because you're going to need some wide area type of spectrum to communicate in, as well as small areas of spectrum that where we can pump a lot of data in, and these are all very use case dependent. So one of the things with smart cities that we find out is that you can't really plan a single solution. You're going to have multiple solutions for multiple problems. The difficulty is integrating all of that. You're not involving people, constantly. You have to automate a lot of these processes. So this is some of the issues that we have to deal with. In addition, this is kind of a frustrating way to do this. There we go. In addition, some of the things that we've seen already is just by dealing with lighting. And if you've been to Las Vegas, you know that lighting is a really big thing there. That's about a significant amount of energy cost to the city. So anything that we can do to improve lighting to make it better and more efficient is going to realize into multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars over the year for any type of consumer or the city themselves. I don't want to go through all of this stuff. So I think we're trying to keep it a little bit short for our opening remarks. I'll leave it at that. But I don't see who has the next presentation up here. It ends with me. So.
We'll just do it ad hoc.
Are you Nadine?
Yes. Scott, nice to meet you.
Good timing.
So Scott was our first one?
Yes.
All right. Sure. is Lauren Nelson. I'm with Verizon Wireless. I've been with Verizon about 8 years. Past 2 years, I have actually worked on the fiber densification team, working with cities to develop fiber agreements and small cell attachment agreements. This past, actually August, I started as a principal architect for emerging technologies for Illinois and Wisconsin. And what we do is develop IoT strategies for enterprise, utilities, and government. And what my slides were, how do I get to me?
So we're just doing the intro first, and then we'll come back.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We started slides.
You started your slides?
Yeah.
We're kind of,
We were kind of.
We were ad hoc.
Ad hocing it.
Sorry about that.
Just do intros and then
Yeah, or
you can change it up, Nadine. You can.
yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to get to Lauren's slides. Let's go I don't see your slides. Hi. For Lauren Nelson's slide deck, yes.
sit back and enjoy the free water.
So you were close.
It's kind of funny. I have a video in my slide deck, so we're going to really see if this is going to work.
We're on Tuesday.
Lauren Nelson.
Was it this one? Or the Verizon Gridwide?
Right.
Yep.
No, not the grid wide.
Yeah, goodbye.
Gridwide?
Grid wide's yours?
So, it looks like they want to download it. I'm not sure if we have Office on here. So do you have another like a PDF of it? Or was it just PowerPoint?
She emailed it. I can log into my email. I could probably.
You want to try logging into your email? I was just going to try and convert it really quick.
What is that? What is this so funny?
That is a HDMI. Do you believe? Yes, HDMI. Or VGA.
Bring in the big guns and then.
I guess we could swap computers for
You switching laptops now?
Yeah. You don't have PowerPoint on.
Huh?
You don't have PowerPoint on these laptops.
No, but we got Open Office Org. That'll bring it up.
Open Office what?
Or
Mine without slides. I didn't bring my PC.
I'm trying to bring this up.
what happens when you open it?
LibreOffice.
Hey. Oh, that's right.
Do you have it over here?
I don't get that too often.
See where AT&T handshake.
Yeah. There you go.
It's loading something. There you
Is
go.
that it?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Did you get the audio plugged in? Or you don't need audio?
Yeah, we need audio.
Good to go.
Thank goodness.
How do I put it in presentation mode here? It's not going to work. Ah. So,
Do you want to switch to your laptop?
no, it's not that serious. One of the technologies that I focus on is working with utilities on a platform as a service for electric and gas and water metering. And what we're doing is a one-to-one connection with the meters that are at the house, and actually bringing them back via private IP to the Verizon cloud and then feeding that data into whatever type of utility back-end system and billing platforms or meter device management systems that they would have. What I was going to show is one of our humanability videos is how we're helping, you know, humans be able to do more things with technology. And what we did with Hawaiian Electric is actually hooked up solar panels, each of them to a cellular connection, so that they could measure energy consumption and what they were doing with solar electricity and how it's helping Hawaii and the electrical utilities out there. So that's what the actual, you've probably seen it, it's on some of the football, it's on the commercials, it's the Gridwide Humanability Campaign. So if we look at what Gridwide can do as far as the smart cities play, we're actually using the neighborhood network, water, electric meters, solar panels, wind turbines, connecting them via Cat-M1, 5G coming soon, and 4G, and then back into the wide area network so that the utilities can use that information and get it on demand. They previously were using like RF mesh or even having people walk by and pick up reads. So this is actually giving them on-demand information, and it's something good. If there is an outage, they're going to know right away, and they're going to be able to deploy people to the field quickly. And that's something that we're doing. It's the grid aware and putting everything on the grid is going to help with smart cities, smart utilities, field operations, retail, anything you can think of. As we start to put things on the grid, it's going to make people more aware. And as 5G gets deployed, that's something with the latency that we're going to be very quickly, you know, being able to deploy cars, public safety, first responders, things like that. So that's something that we're working at with smart cities and emerging technologies with Verizon. And that's it.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. So, let's go next, Ken.
For who?
You.
Me? Yeah.
Ken.
Good here. What do we have?
The magic of switching it.
Not combined.
Public support has to stay
Under
here.
Tuesday, probably.
Tuesday, yep.
Gotcha. I don't see mine. Back to where?
He's in the Tuesday one, but we're looking for Comcast one.
So is it this one?
Nope.
Yeah, let's do it.
Comcast.
I think we only had two for this day. It's Tuesday. This one. Yeah, we only had two for this day. Does somebody have a PDF? You don't have a flash drive?
You don't have it on you?
Yeah. Why don't we let somebody else go first, and I'll see if I can move it over to a flash drive, because I don't have it on.
You could also email it if you want.
Maybe Brad.
Okay.
If I can get into my Gmail, I have it.
Yeah.
Well, let's do Brad and then
Okay, sure.
So is this one back?
Brad is AT&T.
Can you find any of the slides or
Tuesday.
not?
So we only had,
not have my PC.
no, we only had two. We only had the Verizon and the Smart Cities.
I have them on email.
I'll do it without my slide. You're ready to go. I can get this one. I mean, I can push that forward if you need.
Well, you can forward it to me. I could slide decks.
So I have them here.
You're missing slide decks?
Yeah.
Are they on a flash drive or just,
No, she has them on her email. Okay. HDMI.
Yeah. Right here. That was Cordance, this AT&T. And then this was
Comcast.
Comcast.
So, that's it. I think that's it. Yeah,
Which one?
IoT and Smart City. No, the one up above there. That should be it. Yeah, my name is Ken Greene, and I'm the Senior Director for Market Development with Comcast. And a lot of what we get involved in is infrastructure expansion or extension, fiber optic networks, or some of our partner sister companies and organizations such as MachineQ. And MachineQ does a wireless initiative, and I'm going to specify a couple things here that are kind of relevant for the discussion. IoT is not necessarily always over one network, right? So you have a number of different network technologies that have been deployed out there. Each has maybe different applications and different use cases. One of the most simple, which is unlicensed, would be just local area network or Wi-Fi. So many of you are using Wi-Fi here in the environment today. Since it's unlicensed, it could be deployed very much on the fly. Many of you use it either as a hotspot on your phone or you'll use it in an environment such as this, but it has limited capabilities when it comes to distance, right? So when you're dealing with distance, distance limitations of Wi-Fi is about 300 feet, right, from the antenna. You deal with licensed spectrum. So the reference earlier, 3G, 4G, 5G, typically you're going to have distance limitations of about 15 to 20 kilometers from the base station or tower, kind of depending on how high the tower is, and really what obstacles that you might have in the way for signal strength. So that's all relevant when you're dealing with different technologies that are wireless type technologies that might be utilized for IoT initiatives. Third technology outside of the licensed spectrum is, again, unlicensed, and we've deployed within Comcast what's called LoRaWAN, so long-range wide area network, also called low-power wide area networking. So this is in an unlicensed spectrum as well, so very similar to Wi-Fi. It can be deployed very, very rapidly because it doesn't require licensing like a 4G, 5G type connectivity. However, at the same time, very similar to Wi-Fi, it could contend from a frequency perspective and overlapping. So a lot of times when you're out there, you're looking for Wi-Fi signal and you see 10 or 15 different Wi-Fi signals, potentially that degrades overall performance. But LoRaWAN has about the same range as the licensed spectrum at about 15 to 20 kilometers. So you can literally deploy a gateway and get signal strength up to 15 to 20 kilometers away. Again, depending on what obstacles that you might have. Also, it operates in a frequency spectrum that has high capability of penetrating in the ground. So it has different use cases. However, when you take a look at it and deployment, you can deploy a number of different areas depending on the initiative and what you actually want to accomplish. And we'll talk a little bit about use cases here in a moment. One of the things it doesn't do high speed. It doesn't do voice. It is not a good application of a wireless spectrum for video. It is not a good application for voice. So It's not a solve-all. However, it works very well to be deployed in environments that have very poor capabilities when it comes to power. Because with the technology, low power wide area network, as it insinuates, you could literally deploy a chip out there, connect to the network, and you might have battery up to 10 years with a device that is enabled with an LP-WAN type of network. All right? So it definitely has some specific use cases, as does Wi-Fi, as does 4G or 5G or even 3G type networks. And I'll pass it off to, I think Brad is next.
Yes. Oh, that's just fire, sorry. Okay. I'll show you a pretty picture up there. I'm just kidding. Which one of these is yours? I think I read it. It's the bottom one? It's a good start. It's like,
Got it. All right, we got it. Good morning. My name is Brad Lane. I'm with AT&T Smart Cities Group. I'm the Business Development Director for the central region here. And today I'm going to switch it up a little bit and talk about, or first off, AT&T started a Smart Cities practice back in 2015. So I was lucky enough to be one of the 8 folks picked to figure out what our strategy was in the market and everything. So, you know, I'll be the first to say, if you still think Smart Cities is a buzzword, you should have seen what it was back in 2015. We were still posting, you know, what is a smart city definition on here. So we have a whole heck of a lot more to talk about today than we did back in 2015. And I want to focus on what my team, what myself spend a lot of time on now, and that's getting in front of those city mayors, the city managers, and talking about funding models. Because the technology is out there now to deploy. Smart Cities is all about capturing that data, making that data actionable and everything. We've proven we can do that, all of us up here. And so now, in my opinion, the 500-pound gorilla in the room is, how in the heck do these cities who are budget constrained pay for it? And more importantly, how do they contract it and procure it or whatever? So I want to walk you through a few models that are getting very popular. Now, you know, you've all heard the term P3s if you haven't, public-private partnerships. It's in a lot of press releases out there that a lot of the carriers are making. And this is a true barter system, okay? So when you look at the carriers selling the license-based spectrum, this is a way for us to help out our 5G engineers to deploy that small cell densification project. So we will go into cities. We've been on this multiple times. There's been probably no less than 4 press releases from AT&T and some of my peers up here in cities on the West Coast. We're doing this in Portland. But again, this is the barter system, so we will come in and for expedited permit process, for little to no fee lease payments on those poles to attach our small cells, we will, like, not in kind, but like for like, I just lost this here, services. So we will,
I think the battery might be dead.
battery's dead? All right, so I don't, yeah. So anyway, the first model, 3P, it's the barter system. It's a way for us to come in, deploy our smart cities technology at little to no cost to the cities, and in return, we get expedited permit processes. We'll even fund payroll folks in the city to process these permits in an expeditious manner. This model may change a little bit if you're following this, given the recent FCC announcement that came down a few weeks ago on where the government is kind of setting the lease payment standard on those poles. But that's the first one I want to talk about. The second one I want to talk about is what we call a unique funding model. So given our relationships in the industry, our decades of relationship with all these cities, all of our segment sellers had and everything, the unique funding model is we will put all on one carrier's paper, the financing, the installation, the break fix and everything. And then we can set up revenue share models. So an example of that revenue share model is kind of what you see in New York City, that NYC link, where there's a bunch of digital advertising that produces revenue. And then with this unique funding model, the carrier would get a percentage of those savings in return for deploying all this technology around. So again, just to wrap up while this thing powers up. Two funding models right now that we actively work on a weekly basis. There's multiple RFPs for this P3 out there, and then there's actually a city on the east coast of Florida that has an active RFP out for this unique funding model, and there's another city that is going to drop an RFP with this unique funding model. Just some example of this unique funding model I'm talking about. So again, it's a way to get smart city technology in a budget-constrained city at little to no cost to the taxpayer dollars. And yes, you are giving up a little bit of that revenue share model for us to recoup some of our costs and make a little money off it in the long run. So, and that's it.
Mike?
Okay, thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Geronis. I work for InterDigital and specifically a business unit of InterDigital called Cordant. I'm a little bit different than the rest of the panel because my company offers a platform, an IoT platform, so we get to take advantage of the technologies that these guys have provided out in the field and build on top of that. Cordant offers an IoT platform that's based on a global standard called 1M2M. If you're not familiar with 1M2M, it's a global standard initiative for machine-to-machine communications and the Internet of Things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology of some of the technology issues with smart cities. Just one this is strictly a technology type basis, but what I found out there is that smart cities, when you're talking to the governments and the public people, smart cities is much broader than just technical issues. So, but this will be more focused on the technologies. As Ken had mentioned, that there's a lot of technologies, connectivities in the connectivity space. So the solutions and the use cases in smart cities are going to be utilizing many of these connectivity options. So the complexity and diversity of the technology is a key component of smart cities. As you start to look at some of the use cases and where they best are suited as far as either range or speed or bandwidth, things like that, you'll see that the applications that make up a smart city system really can be satisfied by multiple different connectivity options. So any platform that you're utilizing would need to provide those types of diversity in that space. And as Ken was talking about LP-WAN, so the key concepts with LP-WAN that are important in IoT are operating with constrained devices that require low power. Many of them are battery operated. Constraint devices that are going to leverage non-IP based communications. Downstream traffic patterns are going to be different than typical patterns that you see in communications or connectivity, cellular type connectivities. So whatever solution you put together in a smart city space is going to have to be able to deploy and manage multiple networks. And that question mark space is really where an IoT platform would fit in. A platform that would be horizontal in nature, allow the ability to abstract the complexities of networks that are underneath of it, and provide developers of applications an easy API type of interface to be able to develop on top of. The other interesting part, if the slide where you have all the different applications, you'll see that all those applications could be considered silos or standalone type of applications. What you want to see in the future, I think, is the ability to intermingle those types of applications so that you can leverage data from one application, from one vertical, one silo with another, merge it with data from another silo to create some new different types of IoT applications. So as far as operators, I think communication service providers are all going to play a big part in smart cities. I think one of the challenges that they'll face is that as the forecasted revenue of IoT grows, the average cost per connection is going to be dropping, and operators or communication service providers will be looking for ways to climb up that value chain. And this could be a debatable topic, but typically network operators are going to fall into a space maybe 10-15% of their actual revenue for IoT or smart cities. And for an operator to climb up a value chain, they want to be able to invest in either services or solutions or platforms that enable the ability to create services and solutions for their customer base. And just a pitch for a standards-based approach. So 1M10 is developing a standard-based platform, horizontal platform approach, similar to what 3GPP did for cellular. It'll provide enterprises or communication service providers the ability to aggregate, break down the silos and aggregate data across many different applications. So that's where a standards-based approach, specifically what 1M2M is putting out there as a solution for IoT. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you guys. We have a great group of panels here. Does anyone in the audience have any questions at this time? If not, then I have questions. Sure.
So this is for Brad. Sorry, I got your funding model, the PPP, but I guess there's stuff going on. I'm a little confused about your second funding model. Is that where one carrier comes in and pays the money and then other carriers kind of utilize it well? And I didn't understand what the funding model was.
Yeah, so the unique funding model is set up where one carrier comes in, right? Again, this gets down to the procurement and how you contract it with these cities. But one carrier would come in, they'd have the financing arm, they'd have the break fix guys, the installation guys. A lot of times we'll train the cities, bucket truck crews to go out and hang this technology. On the first 5 or 6, they'll do that themselves. That's a way for them to save money. But the unique funding model is think of it as a financing model, right? So, and it all depends. Every city is unique. Every use case is different. But how much, little to no, depending on the model we set up for that city, there could be very little CapEx out of their pocket. So it's really more set up for like an operating X model. But we can do models where, depending on the revenue share of that technology, whether that's smart lighting where we're taking a percentage of that savings and everything, where there'll be no money out of the taxpayers' pockets. So, and that one's a lot newer than the P3. So that this unique funding model, we work with Smart Cities Capital, which is out of South Florida. Really smart. They were some Cisco money guys back in the day. They started Smart Cities Capital, and they just have a wealth of relationships in the industry where they can get very creative with their revenue share models. Does that answer it?
That answers it.
Okay, yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
So this is the first again, Eric Hagerson's Mobile. This is the first I've actually heard about this low power WAN. So it's interesting, right? It seems so what is it for? Low bandwidth, right? It's low power, low bandwidth application.
Right.
What frequencies are being used?
Usually, typically in the 900 megahertz range.
And it's unlicensed?
It's unlicensed.
In the cellular space, there is a license LPWAN, so narrowband IoT, Cat M1 kind of fit in the same space as the unlicensed, and it's another option.
I would also say that, as we've been looking forward in 5G, for the low-powered wireless access, the technology of choice is an improved narrowband IoT. So that, again, you start to hit some of the licensed spectrum that we typically see cellular and narrowband IoT in as well. And we'll see that for the foreseeable future.
And so I'm assuming that could complement, right, because right now a lot of the 5G spectrum, you're way up in the 28 gig, 38, 9 gig.
600 megahertz.
Well, there's 600 too. So that's great. So you can complement each other, right, with low and high.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely distinctly different use cases. You know, LP-WAN, good when, again, low availability of power. You know, you might have it applied literally thousands of use cases. You know, I've had a lot of customers, though, that have asked, oh, well, I'll just do away with my cell phones. No, that is absolutely not it, because typically, you know, you don't want bandwidth consumption beyond 56K of bandwidth, which is pretty low consumption, and you also don't want a lot of talking either, because of the low power that you're looking for, or low power consumption, because the more chattiness you have, the more battery consumption that you have. So if you don't have local power, again, not really a good application for, I mean, LP-WAN definitely applies to low bandwidth consumption and low power requirements is a really, really good use case. Literally, LP-WAN networks in some cases can use LP-WAN, and then they might use a 4G technology even for the backhaul, as an example. So that would apply maybe in an ag environment that they wanted to monitor moisture levels across, you know, thousands of acres. They could deploy sensors literally in the ground, come back to that LP-WAN gateway. Gateway in turn is connected maybe to a 3G type backhaul connection. That could be a good use case.
Okay. Yes, Whit.
I have a general broad question for the communication service providers. Today, how far up the value chain are you? And how far up the value chain are you going for? So my question
What?
my question was, for the communication service providers, for today, how far up the value chain are they? And how far, what's their goal?
What's their ultimate goal?
So she was saying for the communication providers, the Verizon's, AT&T's, and so forth, how
Yeah.
far up the value chain have you gone? And then what's your ultimate goal in terms of moving up the value chain? Thanks.
Well, we're trying to be a solutions provider for the people that are looking at applications. So we're enabling a lot of different things in the value chain for a particular solution, you know, such as the wide area coverage, helping with the provisioning of devices, helping to focus the right types of devices to the right application. So we have specialists that will work with a particular customer to understand their needs and develop the solutions for them. And sometimes that's customization of the particular solution, and maybe even some particular network slicing aspects that would have to happen to provide the backhaul capabilities to them. What we want to be is there's a lot of different things in this space that are out there now, and there's a lot of different ways to apply solutions. But it's difficult for somebody who's not a technological company to begin with to deploy, to specify what they want. So we want to be the place that they come to start to ask these questions, and then try to provide a customization service to them and provide various solutions.
And if you look at Verizon, like we've started acquiring companies, Sensity being one of them, Liquid Wi-Fi, so that we can own the full package. So what I do with emerging technologies is we have the prepackaged solutions that are Verizon owned, critical asset tracking, condition-based monitoring for industrial IoT, and then the grid-wide for the utilities. Those are all Verizon-owned, branded technologies. So we want to be the network, we want to be the hardware, and we want to be the application as well.
Yeah, and depending on the application or use case, will kind of determine where you're at in the value chain. A good example, and Brad mentioned it, some of the smart lighting initiatives, if citywide, and they control the lighting and they control the poles, let's say, and that's all variable, right? If they control it all, and maybe they want to move forward on an initiative to do an all LED deployment, that they might have 50% consumption drop in traditional lighting, right? And also enable that with a wireless capability where you can control intensity or monitor for bulbs that burn out, right? So some of that maintenance case as well. A lot of those initiatives might be something that is on the mayor's desk that says, okay, this is actually a campaign initiative. If I've got thousands and thousands of street lights or lights in general that are controlled by the city, and I can make a statement of substantial savings with a deployment like that, you're quite a ways up the value chain.
Any more questions? Okay. So I guess I had some questions that I come up with for the panel. So what are some of the primary challenges that you see the cities focused on in terms of using IoT to solve?
Well, I think public safety is huge. They're using IoT for, deploying cameras with gunshot detection. A gunshot detection can go to the local dispatch and then send out first responders, all using technology and not even needing human intervention. So public safety has been a huge component for smart cities initiatives. That's what I've seen.
Anyone else?
I'd also say congestion in the cities for traffic and technologies to try to minimize and improve the life of citizens that are in the cities that way.
Okay.
And the traffic management's an interesting one too, because it brings in some different partners that you end up potentially working with. As we've been developing more solutions for vehicle-to-vehicle communications and intelligent highways, you start to work with automobile dealers, with the highway commissions, as well as the cities to design traffic management flow in an area.
Great. Did anyone else from the audience have a question? Okay, so I know the business models are a big deal, right? Many of the cities struggle with that because, again, you talk about how do you fund it, how do you finance it, how do you make money out of it? So what are some of the business models that you've seen proposed, and which ones do you think will be most successful? So someone mentioned like Link New York. Is that one of the big focus areas in terms of business models?
I can take that. I went through it fairly quickly, but the P3s is probably the best example of those funding models right now. So the carriers have budget to help the cities out with this technology, and it goes back to that one model I showed, which is the bartering system. So the P3s definitely are hugely popular, and there's so many different shapes and sizes of that. Again, every city is unique that we talk to. Every city mayor, every city manager we talk to, it's a little different conversation on how we craft that. But public-private partnerships.
So you have to find a company like Smart City Capital who's willing to, put the funds up front, or are the carriers willing to put the funding up front in some situations from their venture organizations?
Yeah. So the deals that.
I found on the web.
Oops, sorry.
The deals at AT&T, yeah. So Smart Cities Capital, that's that second solution I mentioned, the unique funding model. But the public-private partnership, the deals we've done, is yes, AT&T has fronted the monies for all that technology to deploy in return for expedited permits and access to those city assets to hang our small cells on.
So will the cities still own the data in those scenarios, or will AT&T or whoever funded own the data to recoup the revenue that they're investing in it?
Yeah, the city owns the data.
Okay.
So, and not to confuse it, but in that unique funding model, the city still owns the data, but the city can sell that data back to folks like Smart Cities Capital or an interested party that is willing to pay for that data.
Okay.
So, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So, Brad, and you got me thinking because, I'm in NBC, so you were talking about the new rules, where the SEC's proposed were passed, or
Yeah, so, and I got to be careful what I say, but thanks a lot for that. But yeah, let me answer it this way. So, if you're on the carrier side, you love that ruling, right? I mean, overall, you read it, you're like, okay, great, let's get on with this now. Because it's the administration's goal is to beat China to 5G, right? No secret there. So this is one way to do that, where the government, I think, is stepping in, helping the carriers. But even with that, the cities that we're currently working with, we're continuing to go down the path of that P3, because we know there's going to be a lot of cities now that still fight that ruling from the FCC. So it hasn't really, I think it will expedite in some areas of the country, but all the deals that I'm currently involved with right now, we are not redoing them. We're already so far down the road before that ruling, and a lot of those cities, we know we're going to fight that tooth and nail. And so, again, our goal is to get small cells deployed, because it used to be 2020 was the timeline, but everyone up here has to be first, and so now you're kind of looking at 2019 right now, which is good news, I think, for the U.S. Yeah, so that's, I'd answer that.
I think one of the things that really primarily comes into play on the funding model is how much control the city has on assets. So, we've mentioned smart lighting quite a bit, but it could be, smart water meters, it could be smart power meters. Certain cities control potentially all three. A lot of them don't. So it's the utility that controls it. It might be a ComEd that actually owns, manages, and maintains the poles, as an example, and the city is one of their customers. So that starts to become a little bit more complex as far as moving an initiative forward. It might make sense on paper from a business case perspective, but then you've got a lot more involvement of a lot more parties to bring it to bear or bring it to conclusion. I think some of the smaller projects and use cases tend to move a little bit quicker. I had a use case here recently. It was with it was city, but it was for water, and it was for water quality monitoring. So their traditional model was they had various points in the water to monitor quality, but literally they were sending folks out in boats to interrogate. They might have a USB connection, interrogating them like once a week for water quality, for those daily water quality statistics. Now, if they enabled it via a wireless initiative, LPWAN or otherwise, LPWAN was a good use case in this because, again, access to battery, battery versus power, much better to deploy battery there, and they could literally send a burst of data once a day, low power consumption, and a good use case deployment, and they controlled it. If, again, you have 2 or 3 or 4 different parties involved in that, it starts to elongate those discussions and elongates those cycles to advance it forward.
Thank you. I have one question. So who normally leads in the situation with the public-private partnerships? Do you get a system integrator to lead, or who leads? Because it takes a lot of different vendors and partners, right, to aggregate any of the solutions. So who normally leads? Is the carrier lead, or?
Generally in ours, the carrier is leading. If you look at City of Sacramento, it's something where we went in and our director went in and spoke with the mayor and had a discussion on what the mayor's initiatives were, and then developed a strategic plan of how Verizon can address those, including digital inclusion, public Wi-Fi, traffic, intersection management, things like that. So we definitely try to lead on those.
Okay.
Yeah, so far the carriers have been leading in that. So it's our capital for those 5 cells, and so the Sacramento deal that you just mentioned, that's we have that same playbook. So that was announced in San Jose, LA. We're doing it a hybrid of it in Portland right now. But yeah, the carriers have been leading. It's
and
our
then
network.
you aggregate other partners?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then because these would, I imagine, require long-term contracts and long-term management. So is that still under the carrier, or you get a system integrator partner, or who manages that side of it?
Both.
Okay.
Short answer, both.
Okay. All right. Audience, questions? All right, so in terms of the cities that you see, which one would you say highlight like an example or a model for this is how a smart city project should be managed? It's managed well, it was structured well, financing, all of that. Can you cite any examples of ones that you would, I hear Kansas City mentioned a lot, so not that one, and I think it's kind of limited to a certain extent, but any others that you?
Go ahead, Brad.
I just talked to you, but I'll go after you. So one that jumps out that we did is, which was a little more hairy, for lack of a better word, was we did a form of a public-private partnership with the City of Atlanta and Southern Power Company. So we have so it was AT&T, City of Atlanta, and the Southern Power down there who owned half the light poles. And so we put up a digital infrastructure. We have this, we call it a digital node or digital infrastructure, and there's a bunch of cool technology in there like pollution sensors, acoustic sensors, so you can, ShotSpotter can sync up to that without deploying ShotSpotter technology. But that one there was, 5 years ago, the cities didn't want to own the light poles, the utilities didn't want to own the light poles, and now it's the hottest real estate in a smart city. So no one wants to give them up now because there's money to be made. So we were able to pull in the local power company, the city, and AT&T, and so far, knock on wood, that's been going really well. So.
And in terms of ROI, it's doing well?
I'm sorry?
In terms of return on investment and...
Yeah, so I don't know if we have enough time for that, but you look at what's in it for the power company, right? I mean, every time a city does an LED replacement or a luminaire replacement, it's like they take a 20% hit, or on average a 20% hit. So this is really a way, this digital infrastructure solution we have, it's really a way for the utilities to stay relevant, right? So they're going to leverage their assets to make some money. There's models where the utility can come in and pay for that very expensive digital node, and then have kind of first right of refusal to make some money on that data, where the city owns the data, but they're kind of like leasing it back from the utility company. So again, there's so many different models. Only 50% of it is fully baked, and then you got to figure out the other 50% on how you make that work. But that would be one example of the ROI why a utility would want to be part of that.
Okay. Lauren, anything from Verizon?
Yeah, I just strongly on that City of Sacramento case and how we were able to deploy 5G quickly there. It was all, the thing with these build outs is speed to build, and how can we get past the permitting roadblocks and right-of-way access and things like that. So we really needed the mayor to back us on being able to go into public works and create these agreements and deploy 5G quickly. So that was a really good example of a partnership and a way for us to be able to give the technology to the people quicker.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I was wondering, do any of you have projects, smart city projects, 5G projects with the city of Chicago? Or plans for any of the, plans for Chicago or any of the suburbs surrounding Chicago? So I live in Naperville, and I actually work for Nokia. And I'm also working with Hub 88, which is a makerspace that it's a nascent makerspace that's similar. We want to be similar to 1871 one day, but it'll be located in the western suburbs, hopefully in Naperville. But the thinking is we would like to see some kind of a smart city project in the western suburbs, if that was possible, and with Nokia, if that was possible. So I'm curious as to whether you have projects in this area or plans for projects in this area soon.
Anyone?
None for us that are announceable and in discussion, but nothing beyond that. Not with the city of Chicago.
Yeah, we haven't. So again, short answer, yes. We're in discussions with a lot of the larger municipalities around Chicagoland, but nothing that we can announce yet. And it's in the form of that P3. So I mean, there's no secret, right? The Verizon team, AT&T, we all have these external affairs groups, right? So those are our politicians on AT&T paper that help us get legislation and everything through. Those folks have been working overtime because their whole life is about deploying 5G right now, getting those permits approved and getting those city officials to sign off on that. So I think now you're just starting to see some of those announcements, and you're going to start to see, other than the, you got to be careful that, when you bring up New York, San Diego, Atlanta and everything, right? So even Chicago, there's a whole nother, that tier 2, tier 3 type size city. They're just haven't been as quick to adopt, if you will. But we've been having conversations with them for years now, and I think they're just, we recognize very quickly now we got to find a way to help them get funding and procure it, because they're all interested in it. But I think we're just...
And just from a country perspective, it seems that we always see things happening on the coast first. And the Midwest, I suppose there are small cities around, but the Chicago area seems to lag a little bit. That would be nice to shake.
Kansas City is mid-America.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So we're at the top of the hour. You guys, are there any last-minute questions? Well, thank you guys for joining. Please give our panel a big round of applause. Thank you. And sorry for the little technical challenges and things we had, but we overcame it. Mike, Scott, Lauren, make sure I get everybody. Ken,